Welcome to the Skills World Live radio show, sponsored by OneFile, a world where everyone is learning for their future. Stay tuned for all the news, views and interviews in association with FE News.
Hello, I'm Tom Bewick. Welcome to Skills World Live. And in a week when we learnt a security pass to the heart of Downing Street is easily obtainable for the price of a plum job, especially if the main occupant no longer works in the building. David Cameron, it seems, was a gun for hire, taking up a lucrative gig from the head of the now beleaguered Greensill Bank. The same person, by the way, that used to advise the former PM in government. It's got our friends over at the Association of Colleges spitting blood. Not only is FE now facing a crude and insensitive multi-million-pound clawback of funds that were difficult to spend during the lockdowns, but we also discovered this week the staggering price of lost learning in the sector, a whopping £80 million. As for our Rishi, things might look a bit less fishy. He just serves up the £1.4 billion that FE is owed in back payments since the government first came to power in 2010. Indeed, makes me wonder now if all that sector campaigning could have been just so much easier. All the demos and endless debates in Parliament could have been boiled down to a series of cheeky text messages direct to the smartphone of the Chancellor. You know, the ones that start with, "Hi, I'm one of Dave's mates." Anyway, welcome back from your Easter break. It's great to be powering up the Skills World Live radio rig as once again we look to connect the world of FE.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
On the show today, we've got a wonderful lineup of guests, all primed and ready to go. Our focus in this episode is the exams this summer, or should I say, the season of tags. And no, I'm not referring to that game we used to all play at nursery school. I'm talking teacher-assessed grades. After the news, I'll be talking to a former head teacher and the University's Central Admissions Service Strategy Director about what lays in store. Don't go away though, folks, because in addition to some great tunes on the playlist this week, I'll also be catching up with sector leaders at the sharp end of delivering this year's vocational and technical qualifications results, which come out in early August. And given the week of glory the officials at Ofqual and the Department for Education are all hoping for, I thought I'd end the show on an uplifting note. Yeah, because we've got the internet sensation and music teacher, James B. Partridge, who's going to talk us through his top 3 school assembly bangers. But next, let's pump up the volume and reminisce some more with this old classic from Mars.
volume, pump up the volume, dance, dance. Peridot Partners works across the UK education and skills sector to transform leadership and inspire societal change. We do this through executive search, recruitment, and board development services. If your organisation requires support to appoint great leaders through a thorough and national search campaign, or perhaps your board has a skills gap which needs filling, contact Peridot for an informal discussion about how we can help you. We love what we do, and we do it with passion. So search online for Peridot Partners or email education@peridotpartners.co.uk.
Are you wrestling with managing cost and resources whilst delivering a high-quality endpoint assessment experience? Does your current IT solution meet new regulatory arrangements and ways of working? Worried about data security? Need to gain Ofqual recognition? Creatio's helped more companies through the recognition process than anyone else. And because it underpins all aspects of a qualifications lifecycle, more regulated organisations use Creatio's system than any other. Contact Creatio. See how we can help.
Let's find out now what's been making the news headlines in your skills world this week. Universities Minister Michelle Donnellan announced this week that the earliest date that university students will be able to get back on campus for in-person teaching is the 17th of May. The timing aligns with Step 3 of the government's coronavirus roadmap, where restrictions on social contact and indoor mixing will be further eased and aims to limit potential public health risks associated with student populations moving across the country. In other news, the Association of Colleges published a report this week estimating the lost learning of FE students. The lobby organisation said that 16 to 19-year-old students had fallen behind between 1 and 4 months in their studies. The situation was similar for adult learners, with nearly 70% being behind where they were at the same academic point this time last year. The boss of the AOC, David Hughes, said it was time for the government to act and called on ministers to make available an £80 million catch-up fund. And finally, a teacher who made significant changes to pupils' coursework before sending it to an exam board has been banned from teaching. The Teaching Regulating Agency found that computer teacher John Wiseman altered the work by students at a school in Liverpool in 2018. Banning him from teaching for 2 years, the regulator said he'd acted without integrity.
Contact us at Skills World Live. We want to hear from you. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter at Skills World Live, at Tom Bewick. Use the hashtag Skills World Live. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111.
Welcome back to Skills World Live. Tonight's hot discussion topic is, will this year's summer exam results turn out to be a week of glory? I say glory because last summer has already gone down in the annals of history as the great exams fiasco. Not because of any fault of the students or the exam boards, I might add, but because of what Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, called the mutant algorithm. It led to pupil protests outside the Department for Education in London. And we all know what happened next. The embattled Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, did one of his 11th hour U-turns and ordered teacher-assessed grades to be used instead. Facing down calls to resign, he was left to his own permanent secretary and the chief regulator of the exams watchdog, Ofqual, to carry the can instead. Students, of course, were left in a happier position as the grades were recalculated on the basis of what teachers had awarded them, although the country is now left with academic grade inflation running at about 12% higher compared to the pre-pandemic cohorts. Joining me to reflect on all that and to look ahead at the challenges of awarding grades this summer, I'm joined by Mark Lehain, a former head teacher and now director of the Campaign for Common Sense. And completing this three-way chat is John Cope, the Strategy and Policy Director at UCAS. Good day to you both. Mark, let's start with you. Looking back then at what happened last year, Do you think now, with benefit of hindsight, any of that chaos we saw could have been avoided?
I think probably yes. Although if we do go back a year, it was a completely unprecedented situation. We'd had to shut down our schools very quickly. We'd have to cancel exams with short notice, and no one really knew what was coming down the line. So it's understandable if people didn't make the best decisions with hindsight. That said, maybe they could have built more time into the system for appeals, maybe by bringing forward results days. And again, I also think there's a lot to have been said for having consulted on what they were going to replace exams with, the so-called mutant algorithm. There was quite a good consultation process that went through that. Maybe they should have stuck to that longer when they got to it. But in the end, they did what they did. And I guess the silver lining is, although we didn't find out what was happening this summer as soon as a lot of people would have liked, we do know there's plenty of time. There is lots of guidance about how teachers are doing these teacher-assessed grades. And also they have brought forward results days this August a bit earlier to allow time for appeals and to work through stuff. So last year was really unfortunate. Yeah. I'm feeling more confident that this year will be a better situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think arguably the part of the chaos last year was also just a very last-minute decision-making, and also, shifting of goalposts in literally the closing hours up to the results, the first set of results coming out. John, look, clearly a major reason why the exam season is so important, particularly for young people, is because it helps shape their post-18 choices in quite a fundamental way. Do you think that any particular group of students were disadvantaged by what happened last year from a university admissions perspective?
It's a really good question, Tom. And going to university or doing an apprenticeship or going to college, whatever option you choose, the amount of support that you have, either from your parents or your school, is always going to differ. And it's always disadvantaged groups that tend to get less support, less help, less guidance. So decision making can be a bit tougher. And when you change the system at the last moment and you have to rerun things, that compounds any disadvantages that you already had. Yeah. However, last year, despite everything that happened, the number of people that applied to go to university increased by 11%.
Yeah, that's true.
That was actually across all groups. And acceptance has also increased. And again, that was across all groups in society. So, yes, it was a bad year, but there isn't a lot of evidence that it was too bad for the most disadvantaged.
Yeah. I mean, although obviously the cap these days on places is lifted, presumably, though, if you've got more students than usual that have got 3 A's at A level or 2 A's and a B, at the end of the day, there must be just a finite number of courses that can accept the number of students with that level of grades. I mean, does that just cause any capacity operational issues for universities in admitting those students?
Yeah, I mean, those capacity issues would be most acute in lab-based sort of STEM subjects and sort of creative arts as well. Subjects where you need to be in a lab or you need to be in a studio or whatever. It will be a lot more difficult. But actually, a lot of subjects, history, English, whatever it might be, universities have shown an amazing sort of flexibility, because in the perfect storm of not only a pandemic, but also the economy going into a pretty bad place, the labour market going in a bad place, universities are a safe haven. So young people are more likely to apply to university when the economy goes bad. So the flexibility universities have shown has been really impressive. Yeah,
indeed. In fact, all the enrolment figures across both FE and HE show that upward trend. Mark, coming back to you, teacher assessed grades, when you're an ex-teacher yourself, so, I'm assuming you support that notion of the teachers know their students and their work and their potential better than perhaps anybody else. But do you not feel that the move purely to tags, as they're known, teacher assessed grades, has kind of resulted in the Secretary of State himself passing the buck a bit on to teachers this summer?
Well, of course, there is a risk that teacher assessed grades do put teachers in the firing line if they award grades that pupils or their families are not happy with. But even more importantly than that, the biggest disadvantage of teacher assessed grades is that they're not as fair and they're not as reliable or valid as externally set, externally marked terminal exams. That's why the exam system, the grade system, moved back to that a few years ago as part of the Gove reforms, because although that is not a perfect system, it is the least bad system we've got, particularly with regards to students from more vulnerable backgrounds or students that tend to suffer from unconscious bias. So that is not in any way, I hasten to add, a smear on teachers. Every teacher in the land will be doing the very best they can to award the grades that they see fit. But one of the fundamental difficulties of a teacher assessed grade approach is you never quite know, even if you're comfortable within your school or centre, that you've been allocating your grades appropriately, someone down the road at a different school will be doing the same thing, but they might have a different anchor point about which they're placing their standards. So it's far from perfect. However, it's probably the best we've got now with there. And I think in future, employers, universities and society more generally, we will recognise a 2020 grade on someone's CV. We'll recognise a 2021 grade on their CV, and we'll take that into account. The most important thing this summer is that young people get a grade that enables them to the best of their abilities to get onto the next course, the next destination on their journey through life. And every school and sixth form in the land will be gearing up to help people do that.
Would you say that's the key point? It's all about progression. And in fact, you make the case far more eloquently than I could as to why actually having exam boards involved in this moderation process actually helps take teachers directly out of the firing line, at least anyway, by, as you say, for all its imperfections, exams do give you that sort of national cohort, national data set that over time certainly is reliable. Which actually kind of brings me nicely onto a question for you, John, given your UCAS role. I mean, you'll be aware that the Department for Education has this consultation out on at the moment on so-called post-qualification admissions for those going on to university. We are quite unusual as a country. We kind of work on the basis of predicted grades, and then applications are put in and offers are made. So the government's looking at turning that model completely on its head and moving to the system where you apply after you've got the results. I mean, does UCAS support that model?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we have been pretty welcoming of reform. Admissions is in a constant state of improvement and reform, so it's something that we're used to. And I think people, when they saw the department launching this consultation, will probably be forgiven for feeling it's a bit of a Groundhog Day moment, in the sense of post-qualification admissions has been coming up time and time again for the last 20 or 30 years, and you can go back to the 90s. And the Deering report recommended it, and Schwartz recommended it, and UCAS itself did a consultation in 2011-12, which also was pretty welcoming of post-qualification admissions. And the reason why it keeps going back on the agenda is first the logic of deciding so early what options you want to go on to, and narrowing those down incredibly early down to 2 really early on before you actually take your exams and go to it. But I think most importantly of all, the accuracy of predicted grades. It links to what Mark just said there, in the sense of there's on teacher assessed grades and predicted grades, whatever you want to call them. They are assessing 2 different things. Exam assess performance, whereas predicted grades and teacher assessed grades are assessing potential. And potential is always going to be higher than performance. So when you apply to university with your predicted grades, you are going in with grades that are known to be inaccurate. So that's the reason why post-qualification admissions keeps going back onto the agenda. The reason why it kind of keeps on being Groundhog Day or keep going around in circles on this is that as soon as you get into the detail of what form of post-qualification admissions do you want to go down,
indeed,
how purist do you want to be, that's
because on that detail, I mean, I'm assuming any kind of system, whichever model eventually the department looks at adopting, or indeed sticking with the status quo, it's going to involve, isn't it, condensing the whole operational issue of marking, of appeals, and then there's the whole issue then of when the start date is for the academic term itself. So that sounds like quite a practical barrier potentially to making it work. I mean, essentially you could be changing tens of thousands of staff working in the secondary and higher education system, their terms and conditions, for example, to work more over the traditional summer holiday. I mean, does that chime accord with you in terms of some of the practical difficulties? John?
As I said, the practical difficulties are where this consultation will succeed or fail, sort of airing those out. There's 2 models in the consultation.
That's briefly what they are.
which is where what you just described there, where you move everything to post-exams.
Yeah.
That's one of the options on the table, and that would require the academic year to change.
It would indeed.
Internationally and cause a massive upheaval. That model UCAS doesn't support. And is not in favour of, whereas the post-qualification offers model, where you keep the application bit, the research and all of that pre-exams, it's just the offers and the confirmation that happens once you've got your results. That doesn't actually require too much compression of market. It doesn't require the academic year to change. But the one thing you are definitely right on whatever model is that if by moving to post-exams, teachers and their advisors will need to be available at a different part of the year.
They certainly will. Yeah. Well, look, we'll see the outcome of that consultation. I think it finishes in the early part of May. It'd be fascinating to see whether it does get adopted or whether, as you say, it keeps on coming back onto the agenda. Before I go, I mean, Mark, just final word to you then. This summer's exams, week of glory, would you put your money on that, or a week of chaos?
I think all of us involved in the education system learned a lot last summer. You know, we saw the good, the bad and the ugly. And I think what we've got to accept is that this summer is going to be different again. But we know that we need to put students and getting them onto the next stage at the centre of what happens. So I would expect to see more grade inflation in spite of all the checks and balances that, of course, they're going to do. But do you know what? Just as we've had quantitative easing and all the other fiscal measures to keep the economy going, I think we can put up with another year of that for the sake of the kids.
Right. Fair enough. Mark Lehain, Director for the Centre for Common Sense, and John Cope, Strategy Director over at UCAS. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and giving your time on Skills World Live today.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
In 1965, Vietnam seemed like just another foreign war, but it wasn't. It was different in many ways, and so were those who did the fighting. In World War II, the average age of the combat soldier was 26. In Vietnam, he was 19. 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 19.
The heaviest fighting of the past 2 weeks continued today, 25 miles northwest of Saigon. I wasn't really sure what was going on. 19.
Vietnam, the combat soldier typically served a 12-month tour of duty, but was exposed to hostile fire almost every day. 19. A U.S. military spokesman said today more than 700 enemy troops were killed last week in that sensitive border area. Throughout all of South Vietnam, the enemy lost a total of 2,689 soldiers.
The track you're listening to there is Paul Hardcastle and 19. He's only UK chart topper. Now, continuing with this episode's big debate. Will this summer's exam results be a week of glory? I say a week because the Secretary of State for Education, Gavin Williamson, has taken the unprecedented decision to condense results days for GCSEs, A-levels and vocational qualifications like BTECs all into 1 week in August, rather than over the traditional fortnight. Joining us now are two sector leaders who, between them, are at the absolute centre of delivering this year's examination results to thousands of FE students. I'm talking about our regular Skills World Live contributor and FAB board member, Cindy Rampersaud, Vice President for BTECs and Apprenticeships at Pearson. And completing this three-way debate is a welcome newcomer to the show, Morag Davis, Assistant Principal at Nelson and Colne College, and she's joining us down the line. Welcome to you both.
Hello, Tom. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. And welcome, Morag, to the show. Cindy, coming to you first, what's your reflections then on the main differences in terms of the exam results process that was rolled out last summer compared to the way it's all being run this year?
So I guess the first thing I'd say, Tom, is that last year coronavirus was new. Lockdown was new, and we truly were operating in unprecedented times and having to respond very quickly across all aspects of the sector. I would say if I look at this year, I think there's been incredibly good coordination between the awarding organisations, FAB members, JCQ members, the DFE, Ofqual, and also providers to look at putting a process in that is as seamless as possible, but still ensures that learners are able to complete their studies and progress. And I think, we've probably all been, we've all responded quicker in terms of being able to plan, which last year was much harder to do, to make sure that the adaptations are in place, that we're working really closely with the colleges and the schools on the data that's going to come in to be able to award, they're going to be awarding the tags, but also the kind of verification process that we've put in place around internal units that have been banked. So I think there's been a lot of learning and I hope and really do believe that it puts us in a better place to be able to award this year in a way that is less disruptive for learners. Yeah,
indeed. And as I was talking to our previous guests as well, I mean, the big issue there was the fact that obviously so many decisions came late in the day last summer, and of course the goalposts changed literally at the 11th hour. So fingers crossed, things are a little bit more stable from that perspective, aren't they? And we are definitely, on this teacher assessed grades model of delivery. Morag, I mentioned there that, of course, the results will be published this year during 1 week in August. Does that present your college, for example, any major operational or logistical challenges?
I think that the main challenge for us was that staff don't start that early in August. So we've had to shorten the holiday for curriculum staff, and obviously staff were really looking forward to having their summer holidays. They were starting to book holidays, much needed holidays. And so we've had to ask them to come in and support on results day. And obviously that's heavily admin staff and support staff as well as teaching staff. And I think that the key there is about IAG.
Yeah, information, advice and guidance. Yeah.
It is, because we'll have, students who do need that advice and guidance and support. So it's not just a case of coming in and giving them results. It's a case of, every student having some detailed advice and guidance. That is going to be a challenge. I don't think it's a problem in terms of us being able to get ready for the new term. I think having the results dates earlier allows us to start that induction early for the students who are continuing with us, and they can, we can start that induction online and they can be working and filling those skills gaps over the summer until we start in September. For our students who are progressing to university or into work, again, I think the results day being earlier is better for us because it just means that those students have time to really reflect and think about what their options are and choose with our support the best option for their next steps.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually to get that perspective from someone like yourself, who's absolutely at the front line in terms of the delivery of this change this year. Cindy, what's your reflections on this? Obviously Pearson are both an academic board and vocational technical, so this week will be a busy week for your organisation as well, won't it?
Yeah, but we've been working really closely with centres and colleges and schools to look at how we can make this deliverable and work for them as well. I think the key thing for me about the results being so close together, and certainly GQ and VQ coming out at the same time, is probably more that point around minimising any impact of disadvantage, particularly for VQ learners. And actually, when it comes to the kind of progression to university, it's hopefully, by the results being available at the same time, it's kind of enabling, I guess, a fairness around the kind of progression to HE.
Yeah. And on a related point then, Cindy, I mean, how do we ensure, though, that vocational technical students really aren't then disadvantaged this year? Because, we all know what happens every year in terms of media attention, don't we? It's always the GCSEs and A-levels, and obviously not wanting to take in any way, the success and the celebration away from that group of students as well. But still, there is sometimes the danger of, those in the vocational technical track being a kind of bit of an afterthought.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, in every year we should be celebrating all students. And this year and last year more than ever, recognising what a difficult journey so many students have been on. So I think that's the kind of first thing that I'd say. I mean, I think some of the guiding principles that have been set in place around the summer and around awarding, one of them is that we know that there's going to be grade inflation across GQ and VQ. Yeah. But one of the guiding principles, of course, that we've kind of been looking at is that that there's got to be comparability around that grade inflation, so that effectively VQ students are not disadvantaged. So it's making sure that HEIs understand the difference and understand the journey of A-levels and VQ BTEC students. Yeah. And for us, I think the key thing there is working really closely with HEIs to make sure that progression is there. So I think I've loved the fact that in previous years we've been able to celebrate VQ separately, but actually this year is very much about making sure that students are kind of progressing, and actually it's hopefully less about the difference. Yeah.
Well, as to say, it'd be interesting to see whether this 1 week of results being issued for both GQ, as we call it, general qualifications, and vocational qualifications actually becomes, a stable part of the calendar. Let's see. Now, look, I've got time just for one sort of question for both of you, and alas, just a brief response, unfortunately. But Morag, let's come back to you. I mean, there was a survey this week published by the Association of Colleges about the lost learning element that FE students particularly will be suffering from. I think they estimate between 1 and 4 months behind, and of course that has knock-on effects then potentially for those progression choices. Does that figure chime accord with your college and the students you love and know best?
It really does, because, obviously we know that all students have lost learning, but we also know that those most disadvantaged learners have lost more learning because of lack of access to IT, particularly at the start of the year, even though we rolled out IT out as quickly as we possibly could, and we got laptops to all students and Wi-Fi access if they didn't have it. But also the fact that, many of them have no appropriate place to work at home. Many of them have had caring responsibilities and are caring for very vulnerable people, so weren't able to come into college, to access support. So that there are a lot of disadvantaged learners who we need to get up to speed. And the challenge is that it's not just about bringing them in for some intensive practical, because it's about the sequencing of the curriculum. But we absolutely need to spend now, this time that we have now, and also the beginning of next year, trying to identify and then fill those skills gaps, because they need those skills and that knowledge in order to progress. And I'm thinking about those learners who are progressing internally with us.
Yeah, and of course, the AOC are calling for the funding to match that type of catch-up support as well, which doesn't bode well, frankly, when we've had, in terms of the adult funding, this news of a clawback hanging over the sector as well. Cindy, final word to you then. What's your reflections on that AOC survey, lost learning? What's it mean for your learners?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as Morag said, it is real, and I think the extent of lost learning actually follows disadvantage. So, the most disadvantaged communities, it's interesting, the whole thing around DE&I, and there's an article, I think, in The Guardian or the BBC today that talked about that, the kind of impact of lost learning. I think the importance on lost learning is not just what colleges are doing with continued learners, and Morag talked about, the sequencing of the curriculum. But actually, there's something about universities and year one, and particularly on technical subjects, and thinking about that in terms of learners being set up for success. But actually, I think the impact of lost learning is going to be with us for a number of years, and we're going to need to look at how we kind of fill that in different ways, both within education but also within the world of work.
Yeah, I'm sure that debate will go on for some time yet, not least we haven't yet had the report from Sir Kevin Collins with his actual recommendations on how the sector can deal with lost learning. Look, you've both been extremely generous with your time. Cindy, Morag, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us and coming on Skills World Live.
OneFile is the best apprenticeship e-portfolio in the world. But did you know it's ideal for all kinds of vocational training, including traineeships? OneFile is very flexible, so it has everything you need to deliver, manage and track traineeship progress.
We're currently using OneFile for all our traineeship learners. They love it, and so do we. It's fabulous. Thank you, OneFile.
To find out more about OneFile, head to onefile.co.uk and book a demo with a member of the team.
You're listening to the Skills World Live Radio Show. Great music from the 80s, 90s and 2000s. Time now for the OneFile Tune of the Week.
Naughty boys in nasty schools, headmasters breaking all the rules, having fun and playing fools, smashing up the woodwork tools. All the teachers in the pub, passing round a ready rub, trying not to think of when that lunchtime bell will ring again. Oh, what fun we had, but did it really turn out bad? All I learnt at school was how to bend, not break the rule. Oh, what fun we had, but at the time it seemed so bad, trying different ways to make a difference too. The headmaster's had enough today, all the kids have gone away, gone to fight with next to school. Every term that is the rule, sits alone and bends his cane, same old backsides again, all the small ones tell two tales, walking home and squashing snails. Oh, what fun we had, but did it really turn out bad? All I learnt at school was how to bend, not break the rule. Oh, what fun we had, but at the time it seemed so bad, trying different ways to make a difference through the days. Lots of boys, lots of smells and lots of noise, playing football in the park, kicking push bikes after dark, baggy trousers, dirty shirt, pulling hair and eating dirt. Teacher comes to breaking up, back of the end with a plastic cup. Oh, what fun we had, but did it really turn out bad? All I learnt at school was how to bend, not break the rule. Oh, what fun we had, but at the time it seemed so bad, trying different ways to make a difference through the days.
That was another OneFile Tune of the Week. Don't forget, all these tracks can be voted on by you. Just head over to the OneFile Twitter account and select the track that you want me to play on next week's show. As for the tune you just heard there, how can you mistake Madness and Baggy Trousers, a song that reached number 3 in 1980. Apparently, it was written by the band's guitarist as a reminder of his school days. And talking of childhood memories, we've got a special treat for you now, particularly if your memories of the ritual school assembly and music lessons are all a bit, well, faded. Let's bring it all back to life with my next guest, who is a music teacher, pianist, composer and songwriter. His name is James Partridge, and he joins us with his piano, of course, via our broadcast video chat. James, welcome to Skills World Live.
Good morning, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. It's great to have you on. Now, look, I was reading your amazing biog earlier. It's fair to say you're not the run-of-the-mill music teacher. And it says here that you've sung and you've worked for the likes of Sir Paul McCartney, Catherine Jenkins, Rolling Stones, as well as, of course, you've teach music theory and you've studied music at Cambridge University. Tell us about your musical education journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Dorset in Poole, and I went to grammar school there and did music A-level. And I was kind of on the fence as to whether to study at a higher level, to be honest, because it's one of those things where I've kind of been told you can do a music degree, but it might not necessarily help you in to get a job or whatever. So I thought maybe I'll go a bit more broad and do an English degree. But then I was doing more and more music stuff. I was singing in choirs, going on some music courses, and thought, no, I've got to go for it. And I thought, well, if I'm going for it, I might as well aim for, Cambridge. So I had a lot of friends that were also applying that I'd met doing singing courses and things like that. And so I went to Cambridge and did music there. And then when I left, I worked for a music company for about a year and a half. Yeah. And then decided that wasn't for me. The 9 to 5, I thought, it's okay, but I'd rather kind of focus more on music because I was just doing spreadsheets really for a year and a half, which was not as much fun.
Not quite as creative, that is it, as doing musical scores. So what kind of got you into the actual formal teaching of education, of music education then?
Yeah, so I used to go on some singing courses, and then I started actually working on them as a teacher and just leading kind of small groups. So that was when I was about 21 or something. And then I did that for a few years. And then after I'd left this music company, I started doing some freelance singing. But I didn't want to leave the teaching behind. So I started teaching privately. Then I got a couple of jobs at schools in London where I still teach at the moment. Yeah. Teaching one-on-one music lessons. And then since lockdown, I've been doing just teaching, so no gigging at all pretty much for the last
year. Of course, well, all those live venues have been closed down. Yeah, I mean, and school lockdowns as well. I mean, how difficult have you found it to engage pupils then in music education? Presumably not too hard. It's not like double physics, is it, on a Wednesday afternoon?
Not quite. But when lockdown hit, I thought, how on earth am I going to translate this music teaching 101 to online? I'd never done it before, apart from maybe one music theory lesson. And I thought, okay, theory could probably work because it's just kind of chatting to someone and we can work through a paper, like screen sharing and stuff like that. But I thought singing, this is never going to work. But it ended up really working after a while. And then actually when we went back into school, it was quite a shift to go back to in person, but it was great. And I ended up really enjoying the online lessons in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I could see with your YouTube channel, you've obviously got a great footprint engagement there, and it's not only obviously open to your the pupils at the schools in which you're teaching, but you're making those brilliant skills and services available to a much wider audience as well. Now, look, I want to talk to you about last Friday in social media, how I think you sort of lit up everybody's timelines with your brilliant medley of top school assembly tunes. And, just tell us a bit about how that came about.
Yeah, so a good friend of mine got married just before COVID. And before his wedding, I was playing at his wedding, actually. I was singing as part of my group and also in the ceremony. And we were talking about what hymns he was going to have. And then we went kind of down this rabbit hole of remembering our primary school days together. and just reminiscing about sitting cross-legged on the floor, the overhead projectors. And then we thought, oh, do you remember that song? Oh, yeah, but what about that one? And we were all, we were basically just going down memory lane, singing through all these, as you do in the pub. And then it kind of came back into my head on Easter Sunday because I was at home seeing my parents for the first time in a long time. And I found an old hymn book, actually. So I thought I'll put some like Easter hymns, top 5 Easter hymns. Very, very niche content, I thought. So I put it up, and then that ended up getting quite a few views on TikTok. And then I thought, okay, so there, people do remember these songs. And then I found this book, which is called Come and Praise. And I opened the contents page, and it was basically just transporting me back to my school days. And then it reminded me of that conversation with my friend. And then I thought, you know what, let's do a top 10 of school bangers, and it really kicked off after that.
Yeah, I mean, as you say there, just transporting you back, whatever your age you are, I think everybody can remember, probably sometimes in mixed affections. I mean, personally, I've got fond affections of the school assembly. It was every morning, actually. I think not all schools these days will have a morning assembly. They might have just 1 or 2 a week. But yeah, our music teacher, Mrs. Neat, she was fantastic with the piano, and she had all the bangers, as you call them, at her disposal. I think actually my favourite assembly tune, or certainly one I remember singing a lot, was a track called Where Have All the Flowers Gone, which we used to absolutely belt out across the school hall. But what's that? All right, have you got it? Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Long time passing.
Sing, where have all the flowers gone? Well, of course, at the time we would just be there, singing at the top of our voices. It's only several years later that I realised it was a sort of anti-war song about, actually very popular at the time of the Vietnam War. So, we were singing actually a highly politicised song. Just at the time, I didn't fully understand actually the lyrics, but anyway, I do now. So thanks, Mrs. Neat, for that early consciousness of political awakening. But look, you've we haven't got time to alas go through your top 10 school assembly bangers, but just take us through your top 3 now.
Sure. Okay, so number 3, hot in at number 3, I had This Little Light of Mine, so I'll give you a little snippet, and if you're listening then you can sing along.
Absolutely.
1, 2, 3, 4. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Superb.
There we go.
Lovely. So let it shine. Yeah, very uplifting. Very uplifting.
Absolutely.
And number 2.
So give me all in my lamp, keep me burning. Give me it all in my lamp, I pray. Give me all in my lamp, keep me burning. Keep me burning till the break of day.
And then does it go on to say, sing Hosanna?
That's a lot of people commenting saying, oh, you missed out Sing Hosanna. And I was like, no, that's actually the chorus, but I didn't have time to include it. So
yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was always the choruses that people were encouraged by the teachers to absolutely belt out, big, deep intake of breath, fill up your lungs with air, and then it would be sing Hosanna.
Yeah,
away we go. Yes.
Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings.
Fantastic. And then finally your number 1, this week's number 1 of school assembly bangers.
Here we go, number 1. So it goes like this. Shine on me. Let's repeat that. And shine on me. 2, 3, 4. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Lord, and let there be light.
Yeah,
okay.
Very relevant, isn't it, to the time of year we're just passing through as well. And that's the other thing, wasn't it, about school assembly songs? It wasn't always the exact same repertoire every single week. It depends very much on the season as well, doesn't it? Not least with those Christmas hymns.
Yeah. For sure, there's so many great harvest ones, for example, and that brought a lot of harvest assembly memories back. And of course, top 10 Christmas songs. I'm going to have to get onto that later this year, I reckon.
Great. Actually, yeah, so if people want to plug into the top 10 bangers, the primary school assembly bangers, you've got quite a selection there. How can people find you, James?
Yeah, so I've joined TikTok, which is, very 2021, but I'm at James B. Partridge on there, and that's where I started putting stuff out. YouTube, I'm at James B. Partridge, and same with Instagram. On Twitter, I'm at JB Partridge.
Brilliant. Well, look, we'll certainly put your details up as well on the show's website. James, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much for turning me from a 50-year-old into a 6-year-old temporarily. Absolutely loved those songs. Thank you so much for coming on Skills World Live.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
Sorry, I couldn't be there for you in the ways you needed me. The undertones of what went wrong was all that we could see. Before it's too late, well, I change. Well, I change before it's too late.
Brilliant, bang up to date tune that is. Will I Change by Gabrielle and Dresden. Now available, of course, from the show's Spotify playlist. So we've got time for, though, folks. Do tune in next week's show when I'll be putting the interim chief regulator at Ofqual, Simon Liebus, through his paces. In the meantime, do enjoy the outdoor hospitality, even if the summer's not quite here yet. Goodbye.
Remember to subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk or just download the show from any one of your favourite podcasting sites, including iTunes, Spotify and Spreaker. Your world, Skills World.